This is most likely going to be one of the most controversial episodes when it comes to CMMC on the internet. I look at any controversy as potential breakthroughs for the right people. So if you're a defense contractor or you service defense contractors, this is an episode for you on a way to cut through all the noise, all the confusion, all the frustration. Each and every day we get to talk to a number of defense contractors, whether they're our current clients or just folks we're helping in the community to make sense of that next step that they should take. And a lot of times they come to us having either made missteps or they're getting false information from other vendors out there who are trying to make them take a step that is most beneficial for them. In this episode, there's going to be no sales pitches, no acronyms. I'm going to hold myself to that, even though it's hard in this space. And we're not going to, talk you up on what the government is anticipating this being. It's already in front of us. It's already laid out on all of the facts we need to take informed action. I see this as controversial because we're going to talk about many of the issues that folks bring to us that we talk about behind closed doors, and to be able to bring that to you in a very clear way so that you can push the false information aside and really see the clarity of what these requirements actually mean and what you need to do, no matter if you're a small subcontractor or all the way up to a prime contractor, what you need to do next to continue to stay up to speed, first and foremost, with the education and knowledge, but also to take the step that's going to make sure that you minimize the risk of these requirements blowing up in your face. And we continue to see that each and every day. A lot of the questions we get that we're going to address today are questions we get very frequently. So I know if you're a defense contractor or you play in that space, you're probably getting similar questions. A lot of defense contractors today, I'm going to tell a story about a defense contractor that came to us late last week, but a lot of defense contractors think that they have a technology problem. They think that CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, which is the latest Department of Defense cybersecurity requirement for all defense contractors, but it's going to be a different level for each defense contractor now as the program rolls out. They think that they have a technology problem. CMMC is not all about technology. It's about protection of information. That information is both physical and digital. So when you think about CMMC, I want you to try to take yourself out of the technology weeds and just think about how you manage that information, both physical and digital. A lot of companies today, they will go to their IT company or a managed security service company and say, we need to get CMMC compliant. And the way that those IT companies or an IT individual is looking at it is through a technology lens. So that makes the leadership team start to look at CMMC from just a technology standpoint. We had a company come to us, about 125, 130 people headcount, and their CFO was completely distraught. They had spent over the past about 2.5, 3 years, CMMC was really taken serious by their leadership team, about $300,000. And what they just realized, because they went to a certified third-party assessment organization, those are the auditors in this ecosystem, to try to get the certification that their contracting officer was asking about, the assessment organization wouldn't even take them to the next step to allow them to engage them on an audit. And the CFO, the leadership team, they were very confused because they spent all this money. They had an outsourced IT company that was very reputable. They engaged a managed security service company to do all the whiz-bang monitoring and penetration testing, vulnerability assessments. They had done everything right from a technology standpoint, but the issue was from the beginning, they had the wrong mindset. They thought CMMC was, if we buy all the great technology, if we segment our information, we're going to be good to go. And $300,000 later, they weren't even aligned with the full requirements. They weren't even fully up to speed. And that was extremely painful to have that conversation that, $300,000 was not a huge amount of money for them because they had multi-million-dollar contracts. But you can imagine spending that much time and money. I think about the time side as well, not just the money spent. And then going to somebody to say, hey, we're ready to get, our car checked out. And you've done all of this work and put in all of this effort. And somebody says you're not even close. And they were so confused. They thought, the IT company they were working with, the managed security service provider, they were giving them confidence because they were great from a technology standpoint, but they did not have the right governance in place. They did not have really the right program that CMMC is intended to help defense contractors or force defense contractors, require defense contractors to put in place. And that was extremely painful. We helped them work through where it started in the process, going from 3 years ago when they first started to today, and what that path looks like in order to go forward. They had all the best technology. They had Microsoft GCC High. They went there very early on. They had penetration tests running. They had threat monitoring and alerting. They had access controls. They had everybody using a secure file transfer portal whenever they were dealing with government information. They had all of the things that we hear on the internet are the best practices. The secure enclaves, all of the configurations, making sure they had asset management. So they had all of these things that CMMC is known for. But when it came to the governance and documentation piece, their IT company put them into a software, kind of like Avanta, Adrada, one of those types of softwares that basically promised they would help them get compliant. And what happened is they put all the technology information into that system, and they printed out the system security plan to give to that certified third-party assessment organization as they were going through the process. And it was basically identified that this is a template and it's not specific enough to your company. We cannot audit against this. And I'm glad the third-party assessment organization had the ethics to flag that, because they would have failed miserably and had to repay for that assessment. We see this happen sometimes. Obviously, there are certified third-party assessment organizations out there that would have taken that audit and maybe done it and failed them and said, when you come back, it's going to be 30, 40 grand as well, again, because we're gonna have to do the same work. So I want you guys to all avoid that. But I think the biggest point here is that when they started the process, they thought about CMMC as a technology problem. And it's not a technology problem. It's really 50-50 when you look at the requirements. It's 50% technology, 50% governance, culture, people, process, documentation. So you have to look at the two sides, because you're not just protecting the technology data that's sitting on a server, you're protecting the physical and the digital. And as those converge, you have to be able to prove what you're doing, those activities, exercises, how you're actually making sure that information, as it continues to come in the organization, remains secure. I think that's one of the biggest breakthroughs that I want everybody to have. In order to get there as quickly as possible, it's really beneficial, and we see this with a lot of the companies we work with, is laying out the structure of governance that's needed, the activities, and then putting technology to solve those specific problems. What companies are doing now is they're just identifying CMMC as the main problem area, and they think they could throw technology onto the problem to kind of alleviate or solve it. But if you think about CMMC, there's really 17 control areas, problem areas, 320 objectives. So if you can start to bucket this and put a strategy in place, then you can put technology in those different buckets or problem areas, and you realize as you spend that dollar on technology, then you're really solving problems versus multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars down the road, and then you realize you may have to get rid of that technology, or it's not even serving the purpose of solving that specific problem. So that's what most people think the problem is. They think it's technology. They're using technology to try to solve it and have the easy button. There really is not an easy button out there. There's obviously partners you can work with that make things easier, but ultimately you have to take accountability to have the strategy, the plan to mitigate. The results that we're seeing companies come to us when they have that technology is they feel this warm blanket of, it's almost a false warmth, because they're outsourcing it to somebody else who's saying, we have your technology managed, you guys are going to be good to go. We have a compliance software that basically takes in all the evidence, and when an auditor comes, we're going to print out your system security plan or download it from the system, and it's going to be good to go. And what we're realizing is these compliance systems, and all of them are not created equally, but the documentation is very templated. It's not as specific to the organization as these certified lead assessors, third-party assessment organizations are trained to look at. So when they see these templates come out of these compliance softwares, they see it as a huge red flag, which makes them dig deeper. And they realize that this was basically just pulled from a system, and it's not actually showing the organization is in tune with what CMMC is requiring. And this is going to be a huge legal issue that I see come up in the future with organizations. What we do on behalf of our clients is make sure as they go through the CMMC process from start to actual certification that they're minimizing risk of this blowing up in their face later on down the road. And in order to do that, we have to look at, where are the traps? Where are the things that are going to have additional legal exposure going forward? And this is one of the biggest ones, is if they are signing the dotted line to say, yes, we're DFARS 7012, 7019, 70-20, eventually 70-21 when all this is said and done. They're signing the dotted line to say, we're 110 aligned, we have a SPUR score, it's submitted into the procurement PIE system, we're good to go, and then somebody checks on it. That is going to be a false claim. It's just like any legal matter when you sign and say you're doing something that you're really not doing. You can't really play dumb at the end of the day, because there's so much information out there now that you should be in tune with in order to give the right answer so that it doesn't blow up in your face. And we help our clients really identify those key risk areas for themselves so that they can take calculated decisions, either to make a decision on that risk, to address it with resources, or they're accepting that risk. A lot of companies right now in the defense space are accepting the risk without even knowing it. And that's a huge issue that is going to blow up for a lot of people. And honestly, the government, the arbitration lawyers, they're looking for figureheads and examples to set in the ecosystem. And I really believe that there's a lot of these traps throughout the process that companies aren't warning their clients of, because it may come back on them as well, the IT companies, the managed security service providers, because it's not really regulated in today's world until some of these court cases come about. And as this rolls out, things are going to pop its head up. We want to make sure those companies that we work with and that honestly are watching this training don't go through. And that's ultimately what we want to give, because if we were a defense contractor, we would want someone to tell us that raw, real information so that we didn't take an unnecessary risk that we were accepting without even knowing it. So that is one of the problems, how the problem actually is laid out. A lot of people think about CMMC as just technology, so they outsource it to IT or some type of security service provider. And ultimately, the problem is it's a blended approach where leadership needs to be bought in. Even if it's a CIO, a CISO, some type of leader needs to be the point person on this. It can't just be somebody that is on the outside that's managing it for you. Even when we come in at Valor Cybersecurity and serve as the virtual CISO, and we're completely responsible for all information security, cybersecurity compliance, including CMMC, we still have somebody internally, whether it's the CEO, the COO, the CFO, who's the point person responsible for it in the company, because we're just simply an outside service provider that is serving in that capacity. But when it comes to the legal side, obviously we're going to be involved because we're putting, our reputation on the line. But somebody from the company has to be there as well to answer those questions and answer the mail, honestly. So a couple points there. CMMC is not just technology based, it's technology and governance, about 50-50. So most people are not focused on the governance. They're just putting it in some type of compliance software and saying we're good to go from a governance, people, process standpoint. And that's where we see a lot of companies failing audits right now. We have a lot of certified third-party assessment organization contacts and close contacts that are specifically focused on auditing companies. They're already doing certifications. They've been doing it maybe since 2019 when all this came out. They got way out in front of it, just like we did from the readiness side. They have multiple lead assessors. There aren't many lead assessors out there, but the firms that we've been able to partner with and be able to have conversations with each and every week, so that they can help us keep a pulse on the audit side and we help them keep a pulse on the readiness side. We're having these conversations and getting really in depth on what companies are doing wrong, what they're failing in. And a lot of it comes back to governance and actually having a strategy before implementing those technologies. A lot of wasted money is happening. Obviously, if you talk to a technology provider, they are trying to meet some type of quota. They want to get their product in your company. And with that comes along with, maybe they don't tell you all the information up front. Obviously, you want people to be ethical. I'm not saying that all technology providers are bad, but when it comes to big opportunities like this, they're moving so fast trying to implement that they might not fully see your business from a holistic strategy standpoint. So they're just trying to shoehorn their technology in there. And a lot of these technologies are great. They were created by somebody who got out of the government and really saw the power of a technology for defense contractors that could protect information. So that is really what the problem is companies from a mindset standpoint are looking at it as a technology problem. What do you need to do to solve it? I like to break these things down very simply. You need to start with a strategy, some type of structure that breaks this down very simply. I like to put it in control buckets where we can then start to put technology in those buckets, and those buckets all connect to eventually get you ready for a certification versus just throwing technology at a control matrix. And then all of a sudden, you have a great response, but it's not really going to have the impact of those dollars that you're spending on it. And then really, this is where you're going to get the full peace of mind. A lot of people get that warm blanket from having the right technology tools, but when you have the governance in place, the documentation, you have something tangible that you can go to and say, where do we stand? Where are our gaps? There's peace of mind in that we love to deliver to the folks that we work with. We love when we walk into a company and we're having a conversation with somebody. Maybe they don't become a customer of ours because they already have everything in place, but when they are presenting us with their documentation and saying, hey, can you review this to see if we have any gaps that you'd recommend? There's a peace of mind and a confidence that they exude when they're able to do that. But when we have companies that just say, hey, here's our list of technology tools, we have our system security plan, we have no plan of action and milestones, we have no gaps on our POAM, we don't have anything we're working on, we have great technology, we're good to go. They say it with a question-like manner. So they're almost like, we're good to go. And they're asking like, are we good to go? And so you kind of really feel the confidence when you have the strategy, the governance structure, and then you have the technology as a secondary, because that's ultimately what these requirements are all about. A lot of companies spend on, antivirus software is obviously an enclave like GCC High. They go spend a bunch of money on IT providers and things of that nature. Those are all needed, but they're just spending one-off on point solutions versus saying, okay, we now have this strategy, we have this documentation, we know our gaps. What are those priority gaps that we need to start spending dollars and time on? And I think that is where we see companies go wrong, is there's just a disconnect there. And hopefully you see that disconnect. And if you don't, feel free to ask any questions in the chat and we're happy to clarify it from that standpoint. So, that the technology does not make them compliant. It makes them feel good up front, but ultimately, it doesn't help them get the certification. It doesn't help them win more contracts because they can't prove or report on it. It also doesn't guarantee security. A lot of these technology tools have flaws, just like anything. So having that strategy around it really helps you to have a fail-safe. If a technology goes down, you just got a big contract, and your portal to transfer information goes down, you have some type of response plan, maybe a backup, or you have a way that your prime contractor or subcontractors can cover that while your system's down. So kind of thinking through some of that gives you a lot of peace of mind. So as you can see, as I continue to reiterate, this is not necessarily a technology problem, but a lot of people continue to look at it through that. And we had somebody last week, it's extremely real to me because I felt that in my stomach when they said, we spent $300,000 on cybersecurity, but still weren't aligned with CMMC. And obviously they had other requirements, FedRAMP, things of that nature that they were going through because they had a commercial and a defense side of their company. And ultimately, when they were going through the process, they tried to just bucket everything that they were doing on the private side, into the CMMC side. And there's little distinctions there from a documentation and otherwise standpoint. So another thing I want to talk about is as companies go out and do certification. So as I mentioned, we talked to a lot of certified third-party assessment organizations in the ecosystem. And what happened early on, 2019, this all came out, Katie Arrington, stuck the flag in the ground and said, CMMC is coming out. Every defense contractor should start getting ready. So you had all these service providers pop up. You had auditors and you had readiness partners. And in between that time and, say 2020, early 2024, late 24, you see a lot more now. You had lead assessors. So I think of the assessors as auditors. So you have the audit, and the readiness. So as you're getting started, you have readiness. And then when you feel ready, you go ahead and get the assessment, they're calling it, but it's really an audit. It's somebody that comes in and looks at everything you've done up to this point and says, do you meet those 320 objectives? If so, we will issue you the certification to, put with your contracts and be recognized in the accreditation body system. And a lot of these lead assessors spent a lot of time and money getting their firm ready to be a certified third-party assessment organization, which is either multiple lead assessors or you have some lead assessors and some CCAs and people who are going to do the assessments under the the lead assessor. So you think about like a lead auditor, and there weren't any audits going on. And so what do these companies do is they say, we now understand the criteria, let's go ahead and just start doing readiness until those clients are ready for the certification, or the certification's a requirement. So you now have these companies that are doing the readiness and they're doing the audit. And a lot of them will say, we only get certain companies ready and certain companies we'll do the certification audit for. This is absolutely going to blow up in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. When all this started, I was on the initial volunteer board with some of kind of the founding fathers and mothers of CMMC, and we talked about this from a legal perspective. It wasn't about the dollars, the business. The Department of Defense needs a lot of help, so companies can go do both. We talked about this at depth from a legal perspective, and what this is going to do, and I don't recommend any of my clients to companies that are doing the audit that also do readiness. And I get why the companies did it, because they weren't able to make money from the certification. And this is very controversial. But what I see is going to happen, and this is from the birdie's ear, from the arbitration lawyers that I've been able to work with over my career, they are waiting for a company out there to have a division of their company do the readiness and then give it to another division of their company to do the audit, because they are going to take them literally to the ringer, to court, and make sure that they never do another audit or readiness again. They're going to basically annihilate their reputation, because companies are trying to monopolize this industry. From the start, I have always said we're just doing readiness. People have tried to pull us to the certified third-party assessment organization, the auditor side. Companies have to choose one or the other. It's a huge conflict of interest. If you're under the same umbrella, or you have any of the same, even individuals or LLCs, company names, having a skewed audit because you did the readiness, or vice versa, where you have a skewed audit because you did the readiness and are trying to make your friend or your partner look good. And I continue to see this happen, where I know why companies did both, because they weren't able to make money on the certification side, but that has completely changed. There are now companies out there getting certified, and as a service provider, you have to pick both. This is not SOC 2, this is not ISO 27001, where you're just a software that wants to look good to your customers, or you are a big enterprise company that just wants all of your providers to be up to a standard, or your service providers to be up to a standard. This is literally coming out of the Department of Defense, and this is way more serious than a SOC 2 or an ISO 27001. And this is a history changer when it comes to cybersecurity and how it's regulated. And we just saw, I think it was EY, or one of the big four, it's irrelevant. We saw them doing that, where they had one division doing the readiness preparation for, I think it was CPA services. They were also doing the audit. You cannot do that. I don't care, if it's two different subsidiaries, whatever it is, these lawyers are looking for this stuff. And I know it's going to hurt a lot of people's feelings, because they've invested a lot in both sides. But we only recommend the clients we get ready to certified third-party assessment organizations that are only doing the audit, and they know that's what they specialize in. They know that's their way forward, because they have chosen the right path to service clients and that risk not blow up on them. Because the worst thing that a company like us can do from a readiness standpoint is put them with an auditor whose reputation or the certifications they awarded, now get pulled away because they were doing something that was not up to snuff or up to standard or ethical at the end of the day. And a lawyer comes along and puts them out of business, and that certification becomes potentially inactive, and then they spent 80 grand on an audit. That's going to be something that continues to pop up, and we're going to continue to talk about it. But early in my career, so I started in 2017 after I got out of professional baseball, and this was the first thing I worked on, was DFAR 7012 and NIST 171, and implementing it into one defense contractor, and then helping other defense contractors implement it. So I've been in this ecosystem since ultimately the beginning. Obviously, there's people with far more years of experience in cybersecurity, but when it comes to this subject matter, I've been in it since 2017 and have gotten to the depths of kind of the legal aspects. I've worked with many companies doing legal technology investigations when it comes to some of these interactions between the government contractors and the government, whether they had an incident or they were charged with some type of small false claim, and that company needing to now implement a lot of the controls up to the government. So I would interface between the contractor and the government folks. And I've just had a lot of closed door conversations with attorneys, with arbitration lawyers, with lawyers that literally wake up in the morning and look for red flags like that in companies so that they can try to make money off it. Because imagine going to a company that's doing both. They've been there, since 2019, they've been doing all types of audits, and then they've made, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars off defense contractors. And now they have to pay some of that back to a lawyer because they found that they were doing things against board. You can almost think about. There is no language in the accreditation body, handbook or anything of that nature that specifically calls this out, but I'm giving you a fair warning that this is gonna pop up after, maybe it's a year, maybe it's 5 years from now, but I guarantee this is gonna pop up because this is not like any other cybersecurity standard that has ever been out there. This is not similar to SOC 2. This is the national security information of our country, and you can't have somebody that is going to do what's against an ecosystem when it comes to getting a company ready and the actual audit. You're going to have people on both sides of the fence. You can't stand on the top of the fence and say, we're going to monopolize both sides. We're going to make money from everybody. A lot of people right now are saying we won't do both, for any specific company, but it's not going to work in the end. You can do it for now until it becomes the thing, but you're taking a risk, and I want everybody to know that risk, both from the people that are standing on the middle of the fence and then the clients who are making decisions on readiness and auditors. They may save a couple $1,000 by using the same company, but that couple $1,000 could become tens of hundreds of thousands later on once the ruling is more smoothed out from a legal standpoint. So with that, that's one of the biggest things I see that's going to really pop up. That's going to be controversial. I'm going to continue to talk about that, and I'll probably bring on some type of legal party in the future to talk about those types of either false claims or how that's going to play out in the future, so you can hear it really from the lawyer's mouth versus mine. But I recognize that as a risk on the risk registers for the clients that we work with at Valor Cybersecurity. So in closing, I just want to mention that if you're a CEO, a leader of a defense contractor, and this has resonated with you in some way, maybe you don't want to, spend those extra dollars on technology. You want to kind of take a step back and think about the strategy. Not worry about cybersecurity. Ask us those questions so that we can answer them for you. That's why companies like us exist, is you can ask us the questions, we'll give you the answers. And ultimately for us, if you get to a point where you feel like you've reached your capacity, you don't have the resources, that's why we exist. We're not a company where, you get, 5 minutes of our questions and then we start charging you by the hour. That's not how we operate. We only want to work with companies that really need us at the end of the day. They want us to take it off their plate. They want to go back to winning contracts and running their business, and not just kind of thinking about CMMC and cybersecurity and it keeping them up at night. So reach out, send us your questions. We'd love to hear from you. If you were not able to in previous sessions, we have a pre-session questionnaire. You can put your questions in there. We can't answer all of the questions that are in the chat today, but basically if you answer that questionnaire, you'll get a free bonus, a part of joining this session. No strings attached. We're not going to blow you up and ask you to sign a contract or engage us. We are here to help set the record straight for what we wish somebody would do for us if we were in the defense contractor's position. I always feel like if you do unto others as you would like them to do unto you, you're really going to be in a good position. That's proven right for us time and time again at Valor Cybersecurity, and we're here to serve. I know a lot of people in this ecosystem are as well, but there's obviously going to be a lot of misconceptions and a lot of people that are just trying to sell you the next widget or tool. And we want to make sure that if you're listening to this as a defense contractor, that you're able to sniff that out, so that you don't spend money, time, resources on the wrong things. So stay tuned for our training next week. We're going to be talking about similar obstacles, similar things we feel will help you get that next breakthrough when it comes to CMMC. And ultimately, you're going to look back after you've taken some small steps forward and say, wow, I'm really glad that I took some time to slow things down, make the right decisions, not make any spontaneous decisions, to ultimately what a company that came to us last week said, we wish we had done this before we spent the first 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. So until next time, feel free to reach out. We're here to support, answer your questions, make sure you have the right plan, the right roadmap, the right playbook to make your defense contractor successful. My name is Greg Tomczyk. Stay safe, stay secure.